Have you ever been told that speaking in tongues is not for today? Maybe you've heard people speak in tongues and it seemed weird. You thought to yourself, this is too strange to be God. Or maybe you believe that people can still speak in tongues today, but that it's not for everybody. Whether you're skeptical or intrigued, whether you speak in tongues or don't, my new book, 9 Lies People Believe About Speaking in Tongues, is the book for you. Get your copy wherever Christian books are sold and head over to stevebremner.com and click on the first link on the homepage for more information about how you can spread the word. Enjoy the show.
Dropping some knowledge and a little love. This is the Fire on Your Head podcast with your host, Steve Bremner. Steve Bremner, missionary to Peru and blogger at stevebremner.com. The podcast where we tackle gray areas your pastor doesn't talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Bremner.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah? Do you have anything else to say?
Blah, blah, blah.
Do you have anything else to say?
That is free. That is free.
Say, how are you?
How are you?
Say, you
You.
are.
S.
No, you,
T-O-B.
no, you are.
S.
Say, you are listening to Fire on Your Head.
Higher than head.
Jamina, try it. Say, you are listening to Fire on Your Head. No. What do you say?
Higher head.
No, what do you say when you burp? KCDC.
Salute.
Salute, no. Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Greetings, friend. You're listening to Fire on Your Head. I'm Steve Bremner, and greetings. And if there's one thing my parents taught me, besides don't eat the yellow snow, it's that it's better to give than it is to receive, especially when you're talking about counterfeit money, of which I come into contact with an awful lot down here in Peru. I'm a missionary to Peru. If this is your first time listening, I'm recording this from my concrete office. Well, actually, I'm standing in my closet, which is lined with some kind of eggshell foam. I like to record these introductions in good quality, even though when you listen to me discuss my interviews, this week the echo from the concrete in my room is pretty noticeable. I'm always trying something new with my setup, with this office, with this microphone, with my filters, with my foam. And this week I didn't have any foam whatsoever around my desk. Okay, lesson learned. It shows. But anyway, I'm looking forward to presenting to you today's episode because I interviewed a guy named Michael King. And you know, in the discussion, you'll get to know who he is, why I talked to him. But I'll tell you this, I hardly ever... I know I've got a thing on my podcast, my blog website, where people can apply or they can, write me through the form if they would like to be a guest on the show. The problem is almost everybody who fills out that form they have no idea what this show is. They're always people who maybe they Googled and they're looking for a place to go promote their book, their music, or their business product or some kind of thing where it's just like, I don't even have to read very many sentences to know, no, this isn't going to be a good fit. And then usually I do this show relationally, but maybe there's somebody out there, you listen to this and you're like, I should be on that show sometime. I think Steve and I would have a good conversation. That happened with Dr. Shane Wall, a couple years ago, and we've become friends. We've not just been in touch that way. And he's recently been on Sid Roth to talk about angels. His book at the time we talked, I think it was his book Understanding, and we've become friends. We've Skyped. We're in touch, and that's cool, Then his assistant David was the one who reached out to me saying, "I listened to your show. We listened to your show. I think you should have my pastor on. He would be a good fit." And he was right, So it works out sometimes when people are familiar with this show, or they have some kind of relationship with me. They know what gets my juices flowing. But I have got that form as a way of maybe I'm overlooking something, and somebody out there is like, Yeah, okay. I've got other fans, other regular listeners of the show who they're constantly telling me, I could get you in touch with this person, I could get you in touch with that person, I could get you in touch with this person. And it's like, whoa, slow down. Because you got to know something. This is not a big production. Like I said, I'm standing in my closet in Peru, standing in a walk-in closet with not all of the concrete wall covered. I've only got like 10 of these panels. It didn't cover the whole thing. I'm standing, I don't have a team of people who research and they reach out to people. This is something I do as a labor of love on top of the missionarying it up that I'm doing down here in Peru. In fact, I got to teach tonight in our school, small school of like three students in our second year. I'm teaching them some divine healing. I got to make my hand out, so I got to get on with this introduction. We've got four young ladies in our first year school now. We used to have 5, and I had to kick a couple out, and another woman came and joined us halfway through the year. So we got these 4. I'm not this big ministry where I have a team of people who vet my emails for me. I don't have people who research guests for me. I don't have people who read the books of my guests for me and then give me notes. I mean, I do all that myself, right? So I really only can put like 1 or 2 out, about 2, if I keep up a good pace, about 2 interviews a month. And so that's where the monologue type of podcasts come in, where I put those out for you too. So today was another rare instance where somebody contacted me and asked me if they could be on the podcast, and I said yes. It doesn't mean don't contact me because the answer is going to be no, but just keep in mind I'm doing this all myself. I don't have anyone editing these for me. I do that. I don't have anybody helping me promote these things. I do that myself. And I think in the next episode or 2, I'm going to share with you guys my Patreon link. That's where people can kind of donate on a monthly basis to some kind of creative project where, I know podcasters who use it. And, if I could get like my $20 a month Libsyn charges covered, then I'd consider the thing a success. But so I'll get into that next episode. But I do this all myself. That's not a guilt trip. That's not to try to get you to whatever. I don't know what I'd be guilt tripping you into doing. So Michael reached out to me, and I took a few weeks to answer him, even though I knew in my heart the answer is going to be yes. I don't know what you'll think until you listen to the conversation, because he's got 3 published self-published books. We know each other from a group we're in called The Time Is Right, and that comes up somewhere in the conversation, which is a lot of other independent authors, Christian authors, and typically a lot of the people in this group are, charismatic, bent. I also have Destiny Image. My friend Sierra wrote me asking if I'd be willing to have, from time to time, have guests on that were authors of theirs, looking to promote their books. And sure, if it's a right fit, if I feel like, and when I say right fit, I only mean because of the pace that I put these podcasts out and that I do this myself. This is a small outfit. If we ever expanded, like Mark Maron or somebody, or I would love to do this more regularly. I'd love to do this if I had less to do. So that's where if you guys are checking out Warriors on the Wall that I've started to do with James Edwards and Travis Brown, and we're going to try out a 4th panelist, and then the idea is also to have a guest. So there's like 5 of us talking about current events, world events and stuff. A big reason I'm a part of that is because I don't have to do the work like my own show. I show up and we talk about what's going on, and I encourage you to check that out. Warriors on the Wall, that's called. But like I said, I do this all myself, and so if I'm going to spend 8 to 10 hours per episode, not including interviewing the person, or maybe if it's a 2-hour conversation, those ones are harder and take more time. But they're closer to what I want to be doing with this show, sitting someone down. If I lived somewhere near an airport in North America and I could have people in my studio, in my office or something, that I would love to be doing that. But I do these over the internet and by myself. It takes some effort. That's not a thinly veiled invitation if anyone out there wants to help me. Although depending on what help you offer, I might take you up on it. And so my plate is full. Like I'm looking at what I've got going on in September, what ministry I'm doing, what freelance work I'm expecting or can reasonably expect. and if I want to do 2 episodes of this, then I'm full. So no, I don't just take anybody who solicits me. But with Michael, when he reached out to me, I kind of had that deep knowing in my knower. Yeah, I got to talk to this guy. Because I know 2 of his books are on the one's on gemstones and gold dust and stuff like that. And his new book is Feathers from Heaven, it's called. And they're short reads. They're like my 6 Lies People Believe About Divine Healing, like 100 pages or whatever in print. So it takes you, you could read it in the bathroom. Well, if you're a fast reader and you've got diarrhea or something, you could read one of his books on the John. Okay, maybe you don't want to, but whatever. They're fast reads. I read his gemstone book in a few hours. I saw what happened a few months ago when I interviewed Matthew Robert Payne about if it's ethical for prophets to charge for ministry, and other rabbit trails we went down talking that time. So I have a feeling for what knee-jerk reaction the title I choose for this podcast alone is going to cause some of my regular listeners to have. Please don't unsubscribe to me just because of today's episode. I've got a wide variety of topics and guests. I've said since at least October or so of last year, I still have yet to talk with Josh Packard. We might do something, him and Stephen Crosby and I, to talk about the Duns with church. They're waiting on me to set it up, and I just keep not doing it. I've been busy or sick or whatever. And a couple of people from Destiny Image that, I asked for advanced review copies or whatever you call it, digital copies of the books to make sure, because I know so little about the 2 people that I'm hoping to interview, and both of them, on the surface, I think, yep, they would be a good fit. And I said, hey, if I'm going to interview them, can I have a copy? And Sierra sent me a couple of PDFs, so I want to get into those. And that's the other thing, too, is, I try to read the books of my guests. I think the only person I've not done that with was Jeremy Mangersheen's second book. I didn't read that until after having him on again. But otherwise, I try to know why I'm interviewing a guest, what I want to have them on for. And, I knew when Michael contacted me, yep, we got to do this. Don't know when, but we got to do this. So we got around to it a few weeks ago. We had a lot of technical problems. I'm a bit embarrassed about how difficult it was to get a good connection. So sometimes I just couldn't salvage things. There was, we talked for a couple hours, but I think an hour and a half or hour, 40 minutes of conversation is what you get to hear, because there was just so much difficulty, so much on my end. He faded out or something, or he couldn't hear me on his end. And so I cleaned up the majority of that, but there's still moments where it gets a little Skypey. And I think about halfway through it, we switched to his phone, talked to him on the Skype app on his phone. And so we acknowledge that all of a sudden there's a difference in sound quality. But I think the second half of the conversation this is a quintessential Fire on Your Head episode. We get to know each other in the first half. We talk about his books. But it seems like when we had that bathroom break or whatever in the middle, switched to the phone and just got kind of spontaneously talking. If you like listening to the episodes me and Dave Edwards do, where we just kind of pull out of each other some revelatory insights and just go where the Spirit is leading, that definitely describes the second half of today's show. Nobody ever complains about my podcast being too long. It might be because I don't post these so often that it's hard to keep caught up. But today's episode is an episode I make no apologies for being a long one. I just like turning the record button on and beginning the conversation with a new guest that way, and covering all of it and just removing stuff that needs to be removed. But like all the cussing. Just kidding. There's none of that to remove. But some of you are religious and need to hear some joking around about stuff like that. But anyway, somebody in my neighborhood is doing construction. I'm surprised I haven't heard a jackhammer go off yet. So I better end this before the window of opportunity to have a clean recording closes. Michael's website is thekingsofeden.com, and make sure to buy his books on Amazon, or if you're using Kindle Unlimited and you can download so many a month for free. He's got Feathers from Heaven, and the title is not on my Kindle at the moment. The other one is about gemstones, and it's like, he said in the conversation, there's only 2 books on Amazon about gemstones from heaven, and his is the one that's kind of like ranking higher on Amazon. I think his gemstone book is doing very well, so you won't have a hard time finding it if you do a search. So make sure you go look for those and enjoy today's show.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get a good up to a couple of hours, depending on, if we talk fast enough that we feel like we're done sooner. But I just find I prefer having like a conversation rather than like an interview.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And I'm up for whatever. I mean, like I'm very laid back as far as
sounds like
this
it
goes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I usually try to prepare in the sense of like, when I've done interviews and things before, I usually try to have a series of talking points ready.
Right.
But I don't actually care if I use them or not. I just like to, you know what I mean? I like to have something in mind, so if somebody does ask a question or we're talking about a subject, like, I at least have thought about it.
Right. Well, I don't think you'll have a hard time today. But otherwise, I'm going into this like, let's see what happens. So, all right.
Good. And I just sent the Moby files to your other email too.
Okay. I'm reading your book, and you say in it, kids and grandkids, and I look at pictures of yours, going, no, you're like, you gotta be my age or so.
32. I'm 32.
Yeah, so that threw me through a loop because I assumed we're similar in age. You know what I mean? And I didn't know. Well, what if he's just really youthful? And because some people don't look their age in a good way. I'm 35. I've got all this gray hair in my chin, and if I don't shave, I can look like I'm 45 or so. So, you definitely threw me through a loop with that when I was reading it. So how does that work? I mean, that you've got step grandkids or however it works.
Well, secretly, I've got the whole immortality thing worked out, and I'm already like 340.
Right.
More seriously, so my wife is 24 years older than I am, so they're actually a stepchild and step-grandchildren.
Right.
The stepchild, I don't even really refer to as my kid because she's 8 months younger than I am. But the grandkids, I just refer to as grandkids. Like, one, it's awkward to say step-grandchildren in every conversation, and two, I've been around longer than they have. So, I mean, I'm the only grandparent they actually even know, other than my wife. So,
right.
So I'm just their grandfather, not like, although technically on paper I'm a step-grandparent. But.
Right. And so not a lot of people marry like 24 years older than themselves, but you're familiar with Derek Prince?
Yes.
Yeah, like he had his first wife was 32 years older than him, and then
something like that, Lydia. Yeah.
Yeah, so there was like a generational difference between them, and then when she passed away, not much longer after that, he married someone who was like 32 years younger than him.
Yeah.
So he went from like one way to the other, but yeah, I couldn't figure it out, and I didn't know if it would be like a sensitive thing to ask you about, all. Or if you might be like 50 and just young looking, because I learn something new as I interview people and I find out about them.
Oh, for sure. You're
not an author by like trade. You also you're a nurse or
correct?
Right. Yeah. So do you use like a pen name the same way like Praying Medic was? Because of issues related to your job, or is it just an afterthought? Or
so I had originally thought about using a pseudonym, and I was saying that I've known Praying Medic for years before he started publishing books, and he was using a pseudonym because we have in the United States something HIPAA, which is HIPAA. It's basically laws having to do with protecting patient confidentiality, and so we have to pay a lot of attention to not be giving out identifiers that somebody could use to know who we're talking about. So if I have a patient who I'm discussing with another nurse, I need to make sure that if I'm in a hallway, nurse's station, or wherever else, that other people who are either other medical personnel who are not involved or other family members of random other people cannot know who I'm talking about. So,
Okay, so you're not writing about or talking about patients or things in a way that you're worried it can get back to them or identify them. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So typically speaking, when I write, sometimes I'll even just change the gender of the person I'm referring to when I write a testimony, if it's related to work for that very reason. And I also don't advertise where I work. So if you don't know where I work and you don't even know the gender of the patient where they changed it, you really have to know what I'm talking about. I also have to use the name. I have to use the first name. There's literally no way to get back to me. Unless you're somebody who knows that patient and you're already like the husband or wife and happen to come across that problem. And even then, you still wouldn't know it was me unless you recognized my name because I was the nurse taking care of it.
Right.
So basically, there's no real confidentiality risk because of those aspects.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah, I didn't know how it works because I've had like Jesse Berkey on the podcast before years ago, and I know he doesn't like that's his name, and he's a medic, and he has all these testimonies and stuff, and then I've somehow been connected to Praying Medic, or I guess he's using his name now that he's been on TV, but I'll still refer to him this way anyway, just in case. And
I usually do too.
Yeah, and because I'm still used to it, for years. We're talking about Leroy Finkelstein, but we won't. Oops, sorry. Anyway, he, I had him on the podcast, and he opens up his Skype, and he's sent me a PayPal donation before, and it says his real name and stuff. So I'm like, well, he's not going out of his way to keep it like this a secret, but as far as public persona goes, it's so I don't know how it works, because I guess between the three of you there's some a difference in of how you're approaching it, what kind of testimonies you're sharing, you're writing about. I mean, you've got your pictures and stuff on Facebook if you go looking for it. Not not like
I don't hide my picture on purpose. I've just used that one for years.
Right.
And so I recognize that since I always use the same picture, people recognize it as me, and if I change it, it's just going to throw everybody off. So I usually just leave it.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm considering changing it to an actual picture of me at some point, but
right. I'm getting to a point like on my blog and books and stuff that picture's like 6 years old, but it's like the best profile photo I have of myself anywhere. So I'm at the point where it's like, well, the next. Like when I finally do change that to something more up to date, I got to do something similar to it. So so I'm facing the camera, smiling, whatever, and look like that, so that it doesn't matter if someone has seen that picture and then they see the new one, they can tell it's the same guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With little difference, other than all this white hair. No. But other than my chin, I've got more white hair on my chin than most 34, 35-year-olds I know. So that being said, you're a professional nurse, and when or how did you wind up starting to write? Like where does this all come from?
So I actually always loved writing as a kid, and I remember when I was, I don't know, like 13. Let's say 13. I was in my early teens. I remember making like one of those life goal lists of things I want to do in life. And one of the things was I wanted to write a book by the time I was 40. And the reason I made it 40 instead of 30, because originally I was going to write 30, was I was like, well, I never know what's going to happen in life, and I want to give myself a little extra cushion. So I actually managed to put my first book out by the time I was 31. So that was kind of nice.
And were you blogging, or did you have something that you were writing before a book?
So yeah, I had been blogging for how long? I want to say I'd been blogging for like a year and a half before I actually put out a book. But I'd been blogging on my own website for a year and a half. I had been already writing stuff on Facebook and other social media prior to that for probably another 2 years or more, maybe longer. Say probably longer, 3, I don't know, a number of years. So when I started looking seriously at book publishing, I realized, in talking to some other people I knew, that I needed to have my own website. I needed to create an ongoing presence there. And so that was when I started more purposefully blogging. But I had been blogging kind of more spontaneously and erratically prior to that.
Right.
So, I mean, I had been writing anyway, and then I was also I was in the process of working on a book when I started my own website and blog. So, a little bit of both. But as far as history, like I've always enjoyed writing. I've written stories when I was in high school, just in my own free time.
And when you say stories, are you talking about like fiction?
Yeah, fantasy stories.
Gotcha.
So I actually love writing fantasy, and that's something I'm going to branch into again in the future. It's just there's a lot of stuff about the kingdom that I still want to write about first, so it's just prioritizing.
Yeah, I hear you. I definitely had always enjoyed writing since I was young or little or whatever, and I remember overdoing it with assignments in public school. You know, like we could be like your story needs to be a minimum of this length, and then I would come in with like the teacher looking at it going, okay, and so I always had that going for me. And then as I got older, and I don't know, I think in my early 20s, the same month as I discovered what a blog is when I started one of my own. You know what I mean? Like, so I've been at least doing something online for like 12 years now. And it just seemed like eventually you got to write a book, or you've got enough blog content that you can repurpose into a book or something. Or, I look at it like I try to start and finish an article, anywhere from 700 words to 1,500 words or whatever in one sitting. And, there's pros and cons to publishing that immediately. One of the cons being typos and spelling mistakes or things you didn't catch, But in general, trying to publish something in one go or publish regularly or whatever it is, and then eventually it like that's not the challenge anymore. You know what I mean? Like I started going to the gym and recently, so this is a new thing for me. But the example of you lift a certain weight, and then eventually that's not burning anymore. You got to put more weight on that bar or lift a heavier. What are those hand ones called? Like I'm so new at it.
Free weights.
And so it's like eventually blogging wasn't like burning that muscle anymore. And I'm like, I know I gotta write a book or whatever. And so let's get to that. Your book, the first one you published, you'll have to tell me the title so I don't butcher it. I could say it's Gemstones.
Yeah, Gemstones from Heaven.
So the title?
Gemstones from Heaven.
Okay. So I started to read it. I've talked about this on the podcast before, and I think the guy I talked about it with, we were definitely a little bit more skeptical, or we were approaching it more like, okay, so what could be the purpose of this? So let's navigate. This is I'm not having you on to argue with you or to whatever. I'm definitely open to this because I don't see any problem. If God showed us physical stuff, from heavenly realms, that doesn't throw me off at all. So, but I think I know people listening who, they contacted me about other episodes of this show I've done with people who are probably more into that than they're used to hearing me talk with. You know what I mean? So,
sure.
So I'm game. I'm all for a conversation about this stuff. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with your experience or what you feel these things mean? You can start however you want, okay. And I'll go with you.
Let me give just a little bit of, I guess, my own background on the subject, just to explain sort of my heart and where I'm coming from on the subject, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about kind of what I feel like God's shown me about what He's saying and doing.
For sure.
So gosh, what year was it? I want to say it was 2013. Let's say it was 2013.
It was 2013.
I'm
I said
sure
it.
that's what I wrote down. Boom, 2013. So in 2013, we had no, this was 2012. Okay, so in 2012, we were invited by a friend to go over to somebody's house and meet a couple. We didn't really know anything about this couple. It was just somebody that she wanted us to meet, and she knows that I really, really enjoy the miraculous. I really have a heart, always have had a heart, just to see God release the miraculous in people's lives. I think it's really important, and I think it's something that separates us as followers of Jesus from everybody else. And I understand there are different religious and belief systems that still have some supernatural stuff happen around them, but I believe that consistently miracles, healings, those are the things that really separate us from everybody else in what we believe. So, and Jesus even said, if you don't believe me, that's fine. Believe on the evidence of the miracles themselves. So I believe we're supposed to walk in miracles as evidence as disciples of Jesus.
Right. I'm with you. I totally think they're supposed to be something miraculous, like that we should be able to heal the sick, or we should have some crazy things happening. And I guess one of the first times that I ever was kind of positing that it's okay if there's gemstones or angel feathers or stuff, the question I was asked was, well, why? Why would God do that? And the only thing I could think of at the time was, well, if the Bible says that the streets of heaven are made of gold, and we believe, we're tapping into heavenly realms and stuff, what does it matter that much if he gets a little bit of dust on us? Or, these chariots, on the streets in heaven, I'm a science fiction fan, so I'm all about like interdimensional whatever and stuff. And so I just imagine it like that, like, what does it matter if we get some of that, the dust,
road gravel.
Yeah, we get some of that on us. And then, maybe this is nothing new to you. A friend of mine named Eric Gilmore, he said, well, we're his bride. And what guy, what gentleman doesn't want to shower his bride, his love, with gifts, And I remember thinking to myself, okay, yeah, I have no problem with that. I guess I just don't see as much of it as you do. So that's kind of how I'm coming into this conversation. On the surface,
totally.
I don't have some kind of reaction to it, but I definitely don't see anywhere near as much of it. So yeah, I'm curious. You've got my attention. So like, what do you say when somebody asks you, well, like, yeah, why would God do this?
As far as why God would do it, I mean, there's I think a number of reasons. One is because he likes us. And I think the goodness of God is kind of central to really everything in conversation with why God would do miracles, or why God would heal people, why God would, have gems or gold dust or feathers or whatever pop out of midair.
Right.
And it's because he's good. He's kind. He's loving. He does good things. And I think we've had for so long this judgmental view of this God who's standing in heaven like Zeus, ready to smite us with his lightning bolt. And when we have that perspective, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever that God would do any of this stuff, because we're like, that is not in keeping with his nature, his character. He's really just trying to keep us in line because we're such screw-ups. And it's like, that's not really how it is.
Right.
So when you understand that he's a good God, he's kind, he's loving, every good and perfect gift comes from the Father of heavenly lights, in whose there's no twisting and turning of shadows. He gives good and perfect gifts. If you ask for anything, he'll give it to you. Basically, there's so many verses that talk about God's desire to lavish things upon us that at some point in time, it might make sense if he lavished something upon us.
Right.
So, and I think that's part of it too with the gems, is it's extravagant.
Right.
And it's meant to be extravagant. God is trying to grow our faith. He's gems in and of themselves, they're not deathly important. Okay. I've talked to people who are like, you spend too much time on gems, and you really should know, about whatever, be healing the sick, or you should, be out cleansing lepers, or whatever else it is I should be doing instead of enjoying gems. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, it takes about a second for a gem to fall and another 2 seconds for me to pick it up. I mean, it's not like it takes a ton of time, but it's more that it draws our affection towards it gives us a greater perspective on what's possible.
Right.
So, I mean, my mind literally can never squeeze down into the same proportions that it used to be in now that I've seen things appear from essentially another.
Right.
Like, I can never unknow that. My faith can never de-expand to a smaller size.
Right. And it shouldn't. I mean, if you're growing in God, the idea of growth involves growing and expanding in some ways. But you make an interesting point. Like, it's just a minor second, or a few seconds to notice something, pick it up. And so what do you, or what's your answer anyway, to somebody who does feel like you're focusing on it too much? You kind of touched on it, and your response was that it's something that just takes a moment. But like I encounter it with speaking in tongues, where people think because I took the time to write a book about it, that's like all I focus on. You know what I mean? Because it's it's like one thing, or the one of the things they know about me. So they assume that like all I do is teach and preach on that, or go around and try to get people to speak in tongues or something. Whereas it's like a topic I've taken time.
Exactly.
I've taken time to write about, and have other things I'm just as passionate to write about or podcast about or whatever. So like, is that something you would say is similar with you, where it's one thing you can't unlearn or unknow, but it's one thing of many?
For sure.
All right.
For sure. I mean, this is one of those things that like people get so myopic, they get so narrow-sighted about, especially when it comes to supernatural stuff. And it's like they leave reason at the door. And that's actually one of the things that's so important to me. And one of the reasons I wrote the book is because people seem to leave reason at the door. And I'm like, my goodness, like,
right.
It seems like people hear about stuff happening and they stop thinking with like the wisdom that God gave them. And I'm just talking about even basic earthly wisdom, not even some like supernatural, a heavenly download of revelation. Like, they just stop using their brain. I'm like, let's look at everything consistently. And let's be consistent in every area of life. So I'll back up real quick. It's kind of going to answer this question.
Do it.
Like I was saying that I met this couple. Well, this couple has gems here around them copiously. So I spent an entire evening with my wife, another couple of ours who are good friends, this woman who introduced all of us, and then this couple and another two friends there. So there was 9 of us here, and literally gems were falling out of midair. They were appearing on the ground. Feathers were puffing out of midair and just landing. I mean, it was one of those things where like you hear this and you're like, either wow, that's crazy, or I really wish I could have been there. I was really blessed to have been there because it just blew my mind. Like this whole weekend, I was just like, God, what did you just do? My brain was shot. And so after that experience, about a year later, we talked to this couple and asked them to come to a meeting at our house. They lived a few hours away from us. So we ended up, over the course of 2015, we had a series of what I call gem parties at our house. Every couple months, we'd have this couple back. We'd invite people. And we'd literally have like a whole day. It was like 12 hours long. We'd worship, we'd fellowship, food, and just eat, talk. Gems would appear and we'd each wear that. In the evening, usually the husband and the wife, they'd speak on kind of testimony or whatever else they felt laying on their heart. So we had a time for about a year where we were much more focused on this than I am right now. So, I mean, like you were saying about, do you focus on it, do you focus on other things? It kind of comes and goes in waves. And it comes and goes in waves depending on what God's doing and what we feel like God's leading us to do.
Right. So my question would be, when you get together for these type of house meetings for like up to 12 hours, and you call them gem parties. So do you call them that in retrospect, or do you guys get together and that's a stated purpose or goal, where you guys are getting together with expectation that gemstones and angel feathers and stuff will appear?
Oh, definitely. We called them that then. I mean, we did it on purpose. And I mean, that wasn't the only focus, but that was one of the attractors. Let's put it that way.
Right.
We had this couple down who operate in a gift of miracles for this particular manifestation. So we knew that when they come, it's going to happen. It's not really a question. We're not hoping it's going to happen. We have people who operate in the gift. It's simply going to take place. Okay, so as far as the gem parties, we did them on purpose, and I was saying how I highly value miracles, so
Right.
I really want other people to experience the same things that I've had the blessing to experience. I wanted to kind of take the gift that I felt like God gave me and facilitate other people having a similar. So I just contacted the couple and said, hey, would you come down and do a meeting? That one went well, so we did another and another. And it actually sparked a series of meetings in our area where other people said to me, hey, do you think we could do something like this? And I'm like, I don't have a corner. I don't have a corner on the market. I just called the guy.
Well, they wanted to make sure they weren't in competition.
Oh, for sure. And
I don't know.
That. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate their heart. It's just, that's my heart too. It's like, this isn't a competition, you know? So I was like, please do. I mean, let's everybody have the next one at your house. Like, I mean, there's no competition. Wasn't trying to build like a ministry. Like, this wasn't some type of thing I was trying to do other than facilitate encounters. So if other people want to help facilitate encounters too, let's do it.
Right. I hear you. So one question I have that comes up about meeting in your homes for like 12 hours like this. So is this outside of or on top of like a regular church attendance or fellowship or something? Because a lot of people who listen to this podcast are so-called duns, you know, like they don't go to institutional churches. And so when I was reading that in the beginning of your book and just now as you talked about opening your home and whatnot, it's something I wanted to clarify and ask about. You know, do you have meetings in your home, or are you also like fellowshipping somewhere?
So sort of neither, sort of both. So
that's fine.
So I have not. I mean, I have occasionally in the last number of years gone to a more institutional church. My wife and I have looked in the area at different places, and we've never really found a place that we really feel like the Lord's calling us to be quote unquote a part of. We do take our grandkids to one somewhat regularly, mostly for them and for the Sunday school stuff that they get out of it. But I get bored silly in church. My dad's an Episcopal priest. I've grown up in church. I love the body of Christ as a whole, but I get bored nearly to tears in church. So I'm not against church. I'm not against going to institutional church. It's not something I feel like the Lord's drawing me to at this juncture in my life.
Right.
But I stay closely connected with other members of the body. I'm regularly fellowshipping and meeting with people and talking to people, and the same people. I mean, I'm consistent with the people that I'm connecting with. I'm not kind of all over the place. So I would say I'm in a body of believers, but I'm not necessarily meeting in a corporate meeting once a week with them.
Gotcha. As is a good portion of people who listen to this or who reach out to me about episodes I publish when I have people on and we're talking about house church or being a dun or these different things. That topic seems to be one of the more popular for this show. So I was definitely curious about your expression or your fellowshipping with other believers. And so so I got another question. And I actually saw this on Facebook yesterday because you had commented on your photo album or something about gems. And so it was in my news feed. And I was like, yeah, I know people have this question. And I just saw it. So are you ready for it?
Yeah, go for it.
It's not meant to be antagonistic on my part.
There's no question you could ask me that's going to bother me.
Right, because you've probably had them. So when someone asks you, okay, so Jesus, he has these gems and things show up. So do you ever get them appraised? I don't know if, the heart behind that question is, antagonistic when I saw it, but
not at all.
I definitely made a note to ask it because I know people listening will have that question or want to, oh yeah, if these gemstones are from heaven, why can't you, or why don't you, take them to a, jeweler or whatever. So I haven't read far enough in your book to know if you do answer that. But
I actually do.
Okay.
That's okay. I'm happy to tell you too.
Yeah, I'm sure it's something people ask you because I saw it on the internet yesterday.
So chapter 4 of my book is called The Price of a Stone. I actually talk about that and kind of all the questions surrounding it. Are you allowed to sell them? Is God going to smite you if you do? I mean, just because it's a question people have, and it's a very legitimate question. I have what in normal earthly market is a considerably valuable commodity, basically. There is a large industry for precious stones in the world. So, if that being the case, if God's making these things appear, are they worth something of earthly value? I mean, it totally makes sense. I have never had them appraised for multiple reasons. I've looked into having them appraised, and it's actually kind of expensive to do. So if I'm going to pay to have it appraised, I want it to be something that I have a good idea it's going to at least have equal to, if not more than, the value I paid to appraise it.
Right. So what does getting jewels or things like this appraised, what does that involve? Like, what would an appraiser do? Because I'm kind of iffy on what that entails.
Appraisal is a bit of an involved process from what I've looked up. In order to appraise something, basically, you have to take the stone to somebody, and they're going to do, like a gemologist, and they're going to do this like whole report study thing on this one specific stone. And it can be like upwards of $150 just for a single stone, depending on where you go. So they're going to do, probably use like a light spectrometer and whatever other materials they're going to use to test what is this stone made of. And then assess color, quality, clarity, all of the other stuff that people test with stones to determine its value.
Right.
So a single stone could be potentially, $100 to $200, maybe probably close to $100 each. But it's still, if the stone, if you can buy 20 of them, for $30 down at a rock store nearby, it's just not worth it.
Right.
So some of the stones we have, they have chips or cracks in them. There's no way those stones are going to be worth a whole lot of anything. Some of the stones, they're just very small, or they're stones that are comparatively semi-precious. Like we have some that, without actually having them appraised, I can't tell you exactly what they are simply, but I can make an educated guess. They're most likely amethyst, or peridot, or garnet, or baby ruby. I mean, but the garnet, the peridot, the amethyst, they're not likely, especially given the size, they're not likely to be worth even $100. So, and you can usually buy, like I said, you can usually buy a package of some of those types of stones for whatever dollar amount that's less than $1 to get a stack. So, so most of them, it just doesn't even make sense to pay to test to begin with.
Right.
And then I had also bought a diamond tester for like $15 on Amazon and tested all the ones that I thought could be a diamond. And they all didn't test as diamonds, but that just means that they could be topaz, they could be some diamite, some other stone here, but not diamond.
Right.
At which point in time, I mean, if I had one that tested out as a diamond from my, $15 tester, I would consider getting that priced. But
well, one question I have that comes to mind, and this is the sci-fi geek in me, is, or does anyone else ever ask you this question? Does it have to be that if it's something from heaven or some other, realm, like, does it necessarily have to be something that you could find on Earth? No,
not at all.
Like, you could get one of your stones and take it somewhere, and nobody knows what to do with it. I would assume. I would assume that's possible.
That's happened before with some of the other people I knew who have taken them and gotten them tested.
Right.
I know somebody who's taken their stone and gotten it tested, and they got completely different results depending on who took the stone in to get it tested, because they took it to the same person, and the same person did not realize they were looking at the same stone.
Okay, interesting.
So, and that starts to go into a lot of different questions of, well, how did different people get different results with the same stone? Well, that's because I believe in some ways they're living stones. They change based on our faith. They change based on what we expect we're going to hear. The person who believed it was a real stone got the result of them saying, I don't know what this is. I've never seen anything like it. We can't even tell what this is made of.
Right.
The person who took the exact same stone and was kind of really skeptical, thinking, it's probably made of glass. They found that it was made of glass. some other very mundane substance, but it was the same stone.
Right.
And
Interesting.
the same person testing it. So even from like a scientific double-blind study kind of perspective, you remove a lot of variables. You have the same person testing it. You use the same material. So what's changed is the perception of its value or the perception of its composition, and that's literally all.
Right. So another question, and you probably tackle it in the book. And this is something I think I've said or I've asked on this podcast before about this topic, because I totally, like I've said a couple of times, I don't, on the surface have some kind of problem or issue or it doesn't rattle my brain if God were to manifest something from heavenly realms in our earthly realm. That doesn't throw me off, and I was just teaching our ministry school students yesterday about the book of Job. And I kept saying over and over again how I don't need to have the answer why to stuff as much as I need to. I don't.
Yeah.
And that was in the context of suffering, in the context of Job. I drew this diagram on the board, which I really suck at, but I drew like Job and his stick figure people, and they're inside like this television box kind of set. And then on the outside of this, there's these angels or devils, whatever, and God. And that the people inside that box don't know what's going on outside of the box, right? Like chapters 1 and 2, the characters in Job don't know Satan and God had this dialogue about Job.
Yeah.
Like he has no idea this is going on. But we're the readers, and we know what's going on. We know that Job is blaming God for what he let the devil do to him. He doesn't know there's a devil. And I'm telling them, like, I put a lot of things in God's hands that I'm inside this box, and sometimes he's letting me have access to his higher wisdom outside of this box. But for all intents and purposes, there's still a lot I don't know. And so the visual or the mental image I'm trying to communicate, to borrow from what I was just talking about yesterday with them, is like, it's like stuff can come from like outside of that box into it. You know what I mean? And we don't have an idea what to do with it. We might not have some kind of earthly testing system to figure out, like, okay, so what is this little rock thing that came out of nowhere in the middle of one of our meetings? But at the same time, and again, I admit this is my lower wisdom or my inside the box thinking, that, I could say I'm smart or wise or whatever, but I'm not, is, so again, this is a question for you to tackle however you want. Is part of the why, like, would say, God pour gold dust on a guy in a wheelchair, but not heal him and get him out of that wheelchair. You know what I mean? Like, why?
Yeah.
What? Like in one meeting there could be, and again, I'm speaking from, I'm inside that box.
That's a good question.
There could be things I don't see, like Job and his friends and whatever, and I think a lot of us build our theology, build our opinions and stuff from inside that. I nickname it lower wisdom box. I'm using the analogy of a box all the time now since drawing that on the board yesterday. So like, what do you think? When someone says to you, yeah, I went to one of these miracle meetings, came back, I'm still in my wheelchair, I'm still unhealed of this thing, but wow, God was dumping gold dust on people. Like, I don't know. Do you have does anyone ask you a question like that?
Yeah, that's probably the kind of question I get the least frequently out of all the questions I get. And the short answer, it's a good question though. The short answer is I don't know. And I'm not afraid to admit that I don't know. I just don't know. But I have some thoughts. I will say, to back up super quick, there's one last point about sort of the price or testing the stones.
Okay.
The other reason, in spite of the fact that that I could pay money that I'm quote unquote not going to get back for the stones to test them, I don't bother testing them because I just don't care. Because the fact is, I've seen literally thousands of these things appear in front of my face. I've seen them appear on the floor. I've seen them fall up in the air. Like, I've literally watched with my own eyes. There's nobody standing there dropping it, and I can see that there was nobody dropping it.
Right.
I have a bachelor's degree. I'm an intelligent person. Like, it's very obvious. Nobody dropped it over a balcony because I don't have a balcony. Like, there was no charade going on. It's very apparent to me. We have fear about it. So I don't actually care what they're made of because I just watch them appear. So even if they're made of glass, I watch glass appear.
Right. So,
Okay, so
gold dust on a guy in a wheelchair.
Doesn't get healed. So I think, honestly, some of my conjecture, and this is conjecture,
Sure.
is I think sometimes angels have specific assignments, and they do what they are empowered to do in that moment, and they may or may not have other answers, other abilities. I think it's safe to say, at least from the little bit of scripture that's talked about angels, that there are hierarchies of angels. They have different functions. Just cherubim versus seraphim, they do different things.
Sure.
Or at least they're made differently or whatever. We can postulate that they have different functions. So,
Well, that's like I live in Peru, and I hear that's not my job all the time. You know what I mean? Like I could go to the post office, and whoever is supposed to receive things is on their lunch break, and nobody else will just sell me a stamp to put on like my postcards or something. That's not my job. Well, but you could just sell them to me. Yeah, but that's not my job. So maybe angels have that.
Different, though.
Yeah,
I think it's
a lot different. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the angels just don't care, because I think angels are very invested in our lives. But that doesn't mean they're empowered to do it. So let's use the example of the post office. Let's say that you go to the post office, and the guy who's got the stamps, who sells the stamps, is on break, but he also has the key to the drawer that opens the stamps.
Huh.
So, like to the drawer that the stamps are in. So the other guys, he's not like, I don't want to sell them to you. He's like, I literally can't get in the drawer.
Right.
If I could get in the drawer, I would gladly sell you some stamps. I've got envelopes, but not stamps. So I'm sorry. I can give you as many envelopes as you want. I can let you know that I care. I can give you great customer service, but what I can't do is sell you stamps. Well, I think sometimes the angelic is like that angels have different things they've been empowered to do in that moment. When Daniel, he fasted for 21 days, he received his answer from his angel and said, I left to give you the answer the moment you prayed. But I was held up for 21 days. I had to get another angel to help me fight this demonic prince to get through just to get his answer. So let's say another angel was hanging out with Daniel. That angel just doesn't have the answer, and it took 21 days to have the angel to get it. So the angel was carrying a spiritual tangible, like in the spirit realm, it's a tangible substance called answer. Nobody else had that answer. And if for some reason that angel got waylaid permanently, and or the answer got taken from him, then he would never have arrived at the answer because he wouldn't have it anymore. So I think sometimes some of what we're dealing with is spiritual warfare over that healing or over whatever the situation is. I think other times there's an angel who their job is to release gold dust, glory dust, whatever you call it, and stay, whatever their function is, but it's just not healing. And as much as they're glad for you to get healed, that's just not their function. So let's say that they drop glitter, glory, dust, and that increases your faith, and then you're able to eat. And then another next that, I don't know. But, it's just there's so many things we don't see in the unseen realms. That's why we don't see them,
Yeah, it was cutting out. It was cutting out a bit, Anya. So I'm going to repeat back to you what I could understand you're saying, and just to clarify for the listener, if I can't clean this up in editing. So basically, like, and you said it was conjecture, but it's a pretty good, a pretty reasonable thought that angels have different assignments, and it's not that they don't, like, one might not care or whatever, but they might not be empowered or they have their own task to fulfill, and we don't see, kind of like what I was saying with the outside the box thing, we don't see everything that's going on. You said something along the lines of that.
Basically, yeah. I mean, it's not that they don't care, it's just that they can't perform that function.
Right, because
they want you to be healed, they just can't help you. Yeah,
because it was cutting out a bit in a way where, like, I don't think I could fix it in editing, But you sound like you're back, and I personally find that to be a reasonable answer, reasonable explanation. Just the whole, there's things we can't see. And sometimes, what if God wants to, as you said earlier in the conversation, lavish upon us things, lavish upon us, these gems, and we don't know why, or we don't get to know why in this lifetime. The same way we don't know why, God lets bad things happen to good people, or whatever the exact battle in the spiritual realm is that's going on. We don't have all those answers. So why can't we not have the answers to why God dumps gold dust on people in a meeting necessarily? You know what I mean? When he could do something else to manifest his power. I'm fine with that myself. I think there's people listening to me who are going to email me wanting to know why I didn't ask you some other harder questions or something like that. But I'm kind of satisfied with an answer like that about not knowing, not understanding things. You seem pretty balanced. You don't, you've said this isn't something you're going and focusing on. It's like something that happens, while you're going after.
Well, I mean,
Jesus.
I do and I don't at points in time. I mean, there's definitely been points in time where I have purposely prayed for gems to appear. I've certainly focused on it more at some times than others, but it's not my life focus by any means.
Right.
And I think sometimes too, what people don't understand, I think as the body as a whole, we have a very poor understanding of what it means that God is sovereign. And I think really a poor understanding of sovereignty influences a lot of things in spiritual life. And so here's what I'll throw out as to what I believe God's sovereignty means.
Okay.
As different.
So yeah, we had to switch to Michael talking on the Skype app on his phone. You may have noticed a few moments in the conversation where it was getting really, really Skypey and sometimes disappearing or whatever. And I cleaned that up as best as I could. But while we were recording, we just got sick of it. So okay, we're gonna continue our conversation. Michael's on his Skype app on his phone instead of his computer. So I think where we left off. You were mentioning your idea of what sovereignty is and means. So maybe it's probably best to start from the top again on that.
So I apologize if there's any repeat here, but basically, in short, the Bible says in Psalms that the heaven is the Lord and the fullness therein, but the earth is given to man. In Amos, it says that the Lord does nothing without first telling his servants, the prophets. When you put that together with some other principles in Scripture, some other things that we understand, basically the way I see it is this. God is the highest authority in all of the universe, multiverse, or whatever you believe exists. Just because he's the highest authority doesn't mean everything goes his way. We already know that it doesn't, and there's a thief who steals, kills, and destroys. So the thief is a lawbreaker, and by definition, lawbreakers don't care what the highest authority in the land says because they're not following their rules anyway. So God being sovereign has nothing to do with what does and doesn't happen. It has everything to do with who's ultimately in charge and who makes the rules. So we know that if God is involving himself in the earth realm and he's given authority over the earth to mankind, then we're the ones who decide what happens in the earth. And I think that's sometimes hard for people to really understand that we're ultimately responsible. So when people do or don't get healed, largely that's on us. When people do or don't insert whatever the solution of the problem is, that's largely on us, and it's really not something we should blame God for. And honestly, that's very freeing to me because it means I don't have to be angry at God for things that do or don't happen because at 0 point in time in my belief system do I ever blame him for anything. And I don't go around blaming myself either. If there's no longer any condemnation for those who are in Christ, I don't have to be blaming myself. It does mean that I need to learn where I can improve and grow, but it means I don't have to sit blaming myself for why somebody did or didn't get healed. It means that I need to grow to a place where the next time it doesn't matter, they just do get healed. So with that said, like Catholics, I believe there are many devout Catholics who love the Lord with all their heart, and they pray on a daily basis because they've been trained to, Father, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's a blank check prayer. It's saying, God, do whatever you want, however you want. I don't care how you do or what you do, just have your way.
I think God was genius when he had Jesus pray that, because he basically said, okay, I will do whatever I want. Thank you very much. So sometimes when it doesn't seem like anybody prayed and God, quote unquote, sovereignly did something, I actually think somebody did pray. It's just they prayed, God, do whatever you want. And I understand that's maybe not the most common way of looking at God's sovereignty, but it seems to me to be much more accurate in the way things actually work in the earth than it does with, oh, well, God just has a higher purpose. I'm sorry, God does not have a higher purpose for sickness and disease. It's the enemy who comes to steal, kill, and destroy who hates you. There is no deeper purpose. He's not afflicting you to teach you something. That's an abusive Heavenly Father, and he's not abusive. He's good and kind and loving. So once we start to look at the fact that we can't believe that God causes sickness, wants you to have sick, like you can't even accept those things, period, because they have nothing to do with who God is, even as he is expressed in Scripture.
Right.
So once we change, no, it's okay, I'm just sorry. Once we change our view of how we perceive God, it changes everything else into how we read into Scripture and how we understand what Scriptures are saying about things.
Right, and I might be repeating some of the things I was saying to my students in the last 2 days using Job. Did you ever see that there's this picture I made, and it goes around, I've seen people rip it off, it's fine, of that Robert Downey Jr. meme where it's got him like, rolling his eyes. It says, "The face I make," and then people put whatever they want. And I made the face I make when people use the book of Job to refute divine healing,
Drives me nuts.
Right. And I'm the same way. And if there's, my healing book, 6 Lies People Believe About Divine Healing, if there's one thing I regret about it, because it was my first book, is I really wish I'd done a chapter on Job. And that nonsense, or if I do a second volume or something, the first chapter is going to be about Job. And I say that because people use Job as an example instead of Jesus. For example, we go to the old we go to the old covenant and look at a guy who Satan afflicted, and they say, yeah, well, God let Satan do it, but it wasn't God. You can have this mental acrobatics about who did what to Job, just because for 38 chapters, him and his friends complain about it. Yeah, they complain about it and blame God. And when God shows up, he says, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but there's a verse where God says, "You have spoken incorrectly." And then Job says, "I repent. I totally didn't know what I was talking about." You know what I mean? So that casts this shadow on all these assumptions and conclusions they were coming to. I know we've veered off of the thing about gemstones, but I feel like it's kind of like the opposite side of the same coin. The good stuff we don't understand, and like the negative stuff we don't understand. And so one of my students, it's just a class of 4 girls, 3 of them from the jungle. One of them says, "Yeah, but these other verses you just quoted a half hour ago about going through tests, can't God test us with sicknesses and diseases and stuff like that?" And I said, "That's a good question, but he already says he won't."
He doesn't have sickness to give you.
Yeah,
there is no sickness in heaven. He doesn't have it in his arsenal of things to give you, because every good and perfect gift comes from the Father of heavenly lights. He doesn't give bad stuff.
Exactly.
If you who are evil know how to give good gifts, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask? Right. God doesn't give bad stuff.
Right. And so I was talking about persecution, and I was talking about things where we just are going to experience in life what it's like to be betrayed, what it's like to have someone or people or whatever, where they hate the gospel and that affects us in some way. Like we're not going to avoid that in life. We're going to have trials. We're going to have tribulations, but they're not going to be in the category of things that Jesus himself says that he came to abolish. Things where it says in Acts 10:38, do you remember the verse? I don't know how to quote it by memory, but how Jesus went around doing good, healing and setting free all who were oppressed by the devil. Right? So stuff the devil does to us and he sets us free from, we don't have to expect Jesus or God the Father to be afflicting us with. We can know when something's the devil and something else is just life happens. Your car broke down because it needed oil or something, not because the devil was, or God or whatever. So I think I'm hitting that box thing over and over again. That there's things that happen outside of the box where we just don't know, and it doesn't mean God's to blame or to attribute it to. Anyway, we're going quite a distance off from gemstones, but I think this is good.
I think it's relevant too, because one of the questions, and I'll be honest, I get asked some kind of annoying questions, and they're annoying to me, and I understand where the other person's coming from.
Right.
You're not asking me anything annoying. I don't mean that.
I'm not trying to.
No, you're not at all. When I say it's annoying to me, it's usually the attitude behind it is annoying. I am more than happy to answer any question about any subject if the person isn't a jerk about it.
I hear you.
Oh yeah, I've had, even in the last couple days, I've had people, on Facebook. They're like, because I found a gemstone the other morning, and I posted it, and then I posted a picture of God giving my granddaughter one. Yesterday actually, it appeared in a box that we just recently. She's 4. She lost all of her gems. I don't even know where they are. But she lost the ones she had previously from other things we'd done and other events and whatever. They're probably in the house somewhere, but I don't know where they are. So we designated a new quote unquote gem box for her to just keep all her little. Actually, she has gems from heaven that she keeps in a box. All my grandkids do. So we opened the box yesterday to put in that one I had found the other day, just to give it to her, and there was a gem already in the box. So I went around and asked every family member in the house, did you put something in the box? Because I want to know, if somebody else put it in there, I'm going to be appreciative that they were kind, but I'm not going to be excited that God did it, because there's a human explanation for it. I don't like to be stupid. I don't like to just act like very natural things have a supernatural source. To me, that's important. I think It's important to maintain legitimacy of this, that if it showed up from heaven, then I care. If it didn't show up from heaven, I still care, but I acknowledge that it didn't show up from heaven. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So I asked every member in the house, and they acknowledged that no, they did not put one in there. So it appeared in the box before I even got to it. But there's somewhere I was going with that. I think it was basically just saying that, the annoying people. So I posted this stuff on Facebook, and
that's what I saw.
Yeah. And people ask me. One person was, posted some Bible verse and was like, tell me, are you lying to God? And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, did you or did you not fake the gems? And you can't hear, voice inflection over Facebook, but I could feel the spirit through the computer. It was. And it doesn't normally happen to me, but I could feel this angry, vile energy coming off of the computer at me, and I'm like, "Whoa, back that truck up!" So I just did what Jesus did, which is answer questions with questions. I said basically, "Why would you think I would lie about something like this?" And she said, "See, I knew you wouldn't answer the question." And I'm like, "Okay, block you. Done with that."
Right.
I'm not against answering questions. I just need you to not have an attitude in the process. If you want to, people have legitimate questions. It's why I wrote a book on the subject.
Right.
It's because over time, answering the same questions to a bajillion people, it's very time consuming. So, if people hop onto my website, they can read 3 blogs I wrote on the subject. They can read, I've got a book. So I try to answer as many questions as I can. It's just oftentimes I may say, hey, here's the web address to my blog. Just go check it out yourself. Saves me a lot of time and energy.
Right.
But
I hear you with the attitude. I'm also trying to ask you questions that I know people listening have, or people who, they comment on those photos and ask them without the attitude, because I think this conversation, as much of it as we've recorded so far, is going to be a lot more satisfying for some people than it is annoying.
For sure.
I think some people who listen to this with, they come at it with their mind closed, might stay, closed-minded. But, whenever I have people on like you, or I talk to people like Matthew, about charging for prophetic words and stuff, or this other guy, we talked about how he Googles his tongues, and I'm like, yeah, Have you ever heard of that?
That's awesome. No, but that's awesome. I can see how you could do it with Google Translate. I mean, if it's an actual word, it'll come up.
Well, not even translate, but I take a chapter on that in the book, in my tongues book, about if tongues are known languages. And this friend of mine did the same thing. He went to the internet. He's Ukrainian, so he would type in how he thinks something he says should be spelled in Russian and see if it's a word. And he would find Hebrew words. He would find baby names. And then he would look into what those names mean, and it just blew his mind. And so, we talked about it. We had a great conversation. But anyway, I say that to say...
That sounds awesome.
I'm saying that to say I'm all about having people on the podcast that I don't know what to do with what they're talking about. Like, when you approached me about, like, if I'd like to interview you, I thought, the answer is yes. Don't know what'll happen when we talk, but the answer is yes, because this is in that type of realm where I know some people are going to be put off when they listen to this, or put off when they just see evidence ahead of time of what this conversation is about. But you've given me some things to think about that kind of calm my nerves, and I think some people listening to this are going to be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Maybe they don't know what to do with it, but as is the case whenever I have one of these kind of conversations with another author or a person who's got some kind of interesting take on the supernatural or something controversial, you know what I mean? So so I've made it a point to try to make sure to ask you questions about getting jewels appraised or why would God do that.
And I think they're great questions. I think they're important questions, and that's just is. Those are the questions people want answers to, and so I think it's important that people get those answers,
right.
And that's why, truthfully speaking, I mean, I did write a book on the subject. It's $3.99 on Amazon, but the fact is, a lot of those things you can find for free on my blog. Like, right. I'm also not like if you don't pay to play, you can't play kind of person. I'm like, the fact is, God's doing things, and I want people to know about it.
Right.
I may not have written about everything on my blog, but there's a lot of stuff that I have an entire blog post on what is God saying, or what do I believe God's saying through this manifestation. It's free on my blog. Like, you don't have to buy the book, just go check it out. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally hear you.
So with that said, like, I think the one biggest annoying question to me, other than "Are you faking it?" thing, no, I'm not faking it. That to me is just dumb. Like, truthfully speaking, it's just dumb. Like, okay, so I can delude possibly hundreds, maybe thousands, if my sphere of influence were even that large, of people into believing that God is doing something He's not, if indeed He's not doing it. It's like Paul said, okay, so if indeed the dead aren't raised, then your faith is in vain. Everything we believe is like, what is the point? This is dumb.
Right.
Like, so when people are like, are you faking this? No, I'm not faking it. That would be the most stupid waste of time that I could do in my life, is to make people believe a bunch of stuff that's not true, and it's not Christ-like at all. So no, I'm not faking it. But the thing that really bugs me is when people ask me the whole, well, you should be out healing the sick, or out doing this, or out raising the dead. I also am the moderator of a group called the Raise the Dead Initiative that I created 5 years ago, and I actively work to teach and train people how to raise the dead. So I am exceedingly interested in signs, wonders, miracles, healings, inner healing, deliverance, a lot of the stuff that people think is important other than gems.
Okay,
like,
do you want to talk about dead raising?
Yeah, sure.
So, okay, yeah, well, where do you want to start?
I think it's important. Let's do it.
Yeah, so because I've got time, if you do, maybe like half hour left, and
yes.
Okay. Okay. So there you go. I don't have anything that says God can't or doesn't raise the dead. Have you seen very many dead raisings?
I have not. So no, I haven't. And that's the other thing is I know there are ministries that see it much more consistently. I know there are people who've seen it. I personally know some friends. Oh, the friends who went to this first gem thing with me and my wife, they've actually raised 2 people from the dead. So I mean, I personally know, and probably at least once a month meet together with a couple who I love very dearly, and they have raised 2 dead people. So I believe it happens. I haven't seen it, but that goes right along with sort of, we have this really bad focus on death in the body of Christ. Everybody's waiting to die to go to heaven. Everybody is so focused. Like, I'm not a millennialist. I'm a preterist. I do not believe in the rapture. I don't believe that things are getting worse and everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket, and then finally God's going to come, save the special frozen chosen out of it, and then take everybody away to this land of beauty while everybody else suffers. I don't see that as being God's nature, and I don't believe that a lot of the prophecies that talk about that type of stuff mean things here and now. I think they mean about stuff that already happened. So that's its own big conversation, but just as a quick background, that's where I'm coming from. And so I'm not looking to see how I can, save a few out of the fire just in time for the rapture. I don't care about a rapture. If a rapture comes, I'm ready, and I'll get raptured with everybody else. If it doesn't come, I'm still ready, and I'm going to continue doing the work of God while it's day. Night's coming when, I'm going to keep doing what I do. And to me, part of that is resurrection, because I see resurrection simply as a continuation of healing. I know you and I have talked a little bit about this before, about immortality. I don't believe we're supposed to physically die. And Jesus talked about it very, very plainly many times in Scripture. It's all throughout the Old and New Testament if you read things the right way, basically. If you see things for the way I see them, it's all throughout the Bible. But what that does for me is that says, I don't believe we're supposed to die, and everybody who dies is supposed to come back. So I believe very strongly in raising the dead, because if the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, if the Bible says that Satan has the key of death, and it does say that somewhere, I forget where, but Jesus elsewhere took the keys to death, hell, and the grave, then that means the key of death is now in Jesus' hand to unlock people out of death and raise them back up.
Right.
And because death is a work of the enemy very clearly in John 10:10, and it is not a work of God, then at no point in time do I believe death is acceptable as an end result. Healing, the whole point of healing is to stop sickness. The end result, the natural end result of sickness, as a nurse, when people get sick, if they keep getting sick, they eventually die.
Right.
So if I, as a physical profession, want to stop people from getting sick and dying, as a spiritual profession, if you will, I also want to stop people from getting sick and dying. I find it very important to deal with divine physical healing, inner healing, casting out demons, all of which help people live in physical health.
Right.
If you live in physical health, it's impossible for you to die.
So, I don't know what to make of that. I'm not going to try to argue with you, because again, on the surface of it, I would need to process and think about what you're saying, because Dave Edwards, he's a guy I have on the podcast a lot. One time he said the same thing on the podcast, and I was like, what? What do I say to that?
Oh, I totally just dropped a bomb on you right there. No
sure,
worries.
Sure. But I give you the space to go with that and clarify what you're saying, because I too, on the surface, I take the time in my healing book on a chapter about, like, if God wants to heal us, why do we die? As if dying, giving up the ghost or having our physical bodies eventually give up is somehow connected to this idea that, like, why should God bother healing a physical body if it's just going to die one day? Like, it
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but I hear people from time to time say that. I grew up in a Plymouth Brethren church, and it was this big controversy when my mom got healed of her fibromyalgia, and I introduced the book that way, talking about my mom's testimony, and I remember people would come up to me and they would argue about it. And I would say, well, there she is. Go talk to her. Go ask her. Like, in some ways, I felt like, in James chapter or John 9 or whatever chapter is, where Jesus heals the guy, and then the Pharisees are trying to, like, excommunicate him and stuff, and they're like, It's like, well, why don't you ask him? All I know is before I couldn't see and now I can. And they're like, they kick him out. Well, I remember relating to that passage differently than before, and people would come up to me in the foyer from my southern friends. People would come up to me at the end of a service or something at this church, and they'd be talking to me about it, and I'd be like, well, why don't you ask her? The person you can't argue with about their, about their testimony, because you can't argue a testimony. You can argue theology. So anyway, and I remember, like, a week or two later, someone saying something from the platform, one of the worship leaders, Jesus healed all sorts of people, but they eventually just, died anyway one day. So the ultimate healing is not going after a physical healing in your body. I'm like, what the heck kind of
drives me nuts.
Logic and theology is that? Of course. But the problem is, God is so good, he still healed people who would go on to die one day anyway. So what's your point? I never understood that. But anyway, that's my thought process for now.
Well, and that's just it. I think the idea of physical immortality actually answers that question. We're not supposed to die. We were never supposed to die. Adam and Eve were never supposed to die, and they never would have. Like in Genesis, God's very clear. If you eat of this, you will die. You may not die that very second. There's nothing that states exactly when that death is going to happen, but the fact is, you go from a point of never dying to now you will die. And John 3:16 even says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son so they would not what? Would not perish, would not die, but have everlasting life." Everybody always explains that as, so they'd live forever in heaven after they die? Yeah, but Jesus, John 3:16 says so they wouldn't die. Jesus even said, "This is the bread that came down from heaven, that you would eat of it and not die." So you can't have it both ways, basically. You can't have it where you're going to die, but you can still not die, but you died, but it doesn't work. Like, you're doing theology gymnastics now, and it doesn't make any sense. So at some point in time, like even Hebrews 9:27 is a verse everybody always quotes to me. Well, it's given man wants to die. Okay, read the next two verses after that. It talks about, essentially, the paraphrase is, so Jesus died for you.
Right.
It's a very gross paraphrase.
Well, not even just that, but that verse saying, it is appointed once to die. I've heard some credible explanations that, look at how Jesus, he raised people from the dead in his ministry. Those people died twice. At least, if they didn't get raised a third time. So what about the emphasis being on the word appointed? What about Enoch never died? Right. Elijah never died. Right, so there's multiple people who've broken that rule. Yeah, but what if the emphasis on that verse and what the author of Hebrews was saying wasn't the word death, but the word appointed? Like, we've all got a lifespan or some kind of time frame we're meant to be on this earth for. And so people like Enoch or Elijah, for them it wasn't their heart giving out one day, but it was to be taken off the planet. What if people in the Gospels that Jesus raised from the dead, they were appointed to be on this planet for a certain time frame, and the devil took them out early, so Jesus corrected that? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. What if there's some, outside of that box I was talking about, what if there's some stuff we don't see, we don't know is going on outside of the box? That person wasn't meant to go home early, Well, in order to have a significant impact in the earth, scripturally speaking, I suggest we have to have a body. No, seriously. Yeah. And I don't mean it. I don't mean it just like, oh, you're dead if you don't have a body. I mean that, like, legally, spiritually speaking, if you don't have a body, you do not have much impact in what happens in the earth. Explain to me, why on earth in Jude was Satan fighting over Moses' body? Who really gives a crap? Who really cares about? You can say crap. Okay, who gives a crap about Moses' body if he's dead? Right. All right? Nobody cares because he's dead. I suggest he needed his body because he still needed to have authority in the earth as a living human being, and so God took his body to heaven or whatever he did with it so that Moses still has a different authority than he would if he had died. You know what I mean? Like, we know Moses died, but what if he got his body back? Right. Like, there's things like that I get are a bit out there, but yeah. And see, this I don't see any reason why Enoch is no longer allowed to be on the earth. Right. He didn't die. He can come back. And what we're doing now, like this is what, like, I love about doing this podcast for. Like I told you, we needed a couple hours because it's like the first hour we get ourselves going. Yeah, that's how it usually goes. As you can see, this is something I'm super passionate about. I love the gems, I love miracles, but I'm probably more passionate about resurrection and immortality because for me, it's all about the life of Christ. It's all about what Jesus did for us, and what he did was he conquered death. He conquered every power of hell set against us, every power of sin, everything that could cause a problem in our lives. Jesus destroyed that so that we could live abundant lives.
And I believe that it is the central message of the gospel. And so Paul himself believed in immortality. In 2 Timothy 1:10 through 11, he said something to the effect of, there's this gospel of life and immortality, of which I've been appointed an apostle, teacher, and preacher. Paul preached the gospel of immortality. If you look throughout his writings, he talks about it. Not always obviously, but he did actually talk about it. And so for me, it's like, this is the complete gospel. You know, the message that you don't have to physically die. Well, once I can believe for living forever, I don't really think finances and faith for finances are going to be a problem. I don't really think faith for healing is going to be a problem if I believe my bodies have to continually heal itself to be able to live.
Right.
And to go one step further, like, it also means that at some point in time, my body is physically going to be transfigured such that it matches with the, you know, being clothed with the mortal being clothed with immortality. Like, it's a putting on, it's not a taking off. Like, I don't have to take off this body and die in order to be clothed with immortality. It says the mortal will put on, will additionally clothe themselves with immortality. So I think the goal is for you to move from mortality to immortality without ever dying. Because Jesus himself said there's some of you who won't taste death. You're not going to die.
And do you think when he said that, because you mentioned you're more of a preterist, do you think when he said, you know, there's some who weren't going to die, that he was talking to like his listeners, the people physically present with him about?
Well, yeah, that's what he said. He literally said, there are some standing here who will not die. That's as literal as you can make it.
But
people literally standing right here.
But for the preterist, I would point out that he was saying that about you know, like in Matthew, is it 16 or 17? But he told his disciples, like, he says this more than once, but the version in Matthew, for example, he's saying they're going to see his kingdom, you know, coming or whatever. And then I've heard it explained, he was referring to, like, you know, 6 days later, he's on the Mount of Transfiguration with Peter, James, and John, and they saw him. They you know, didn't die, because, you know, like a week later, they got to see what Jesus was talking about. Just throwing that out.
I can see that too.
I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not, you know.
I'll be honest. I am probably not like a pure preterist. Like, truthfully, I don't actually care about theological names. Like, I don't really pay any attention that much. Only in the last, like, couple weeks. Technically,
what I just clarified for you doesn't have anything to do with preterism. I was confusing with some other things where he was saying, like Matthew 24, these things that were going to happen in this generation, or people who are standing here will not taste death until they see these things happen. And then those things happened, like in their generation. Like,
yeah, and that's just it. I believe that stuff is exactly that. The temple was destroyed. Like, there's a lot of that stuff that Jesus said it's going to happen. And if you look historically, it happened. So,
right. But
I don't have a problem with it having an additional meaning.
Yeah, but could somebody be saying, somebody say that Jesus is saying with that, those things would not happen until they wouldn't die until those things happened, and then those things happened, and it doesn't mean they would never die, as much as they would see these things happen in their lifetime.
And sure, that's possible, and I'm fine with that. I mean,
I'm just enjoying this conversation.
Yeah, no, sure. Here. I mean, like, I don't. It's quite possible, and sure, even if that happens and then they died, I don't think it changes the underlying message that I believe Jesus put out.
Gotcha.
Because, okay, the fact is, people die. That's just a fact.
Of course.
All right? I think anybody who's not unintelligent will agree with that fact. But I also believe that we're not supposed to, even though we do. This goes back to the God's sovereignty issue. Just because it happens doesn't mean it's God's highest will for people. So I believe in resurrection, partly because Jesus just flat out told us to, but partly because I believe that God's highest will involves people being alive. His will is not always manifested, and therefore he set us out as his sort of spiritual enforcers in the earth to manifest his will. So if I don't pray for somebody for healing, there's no guarantee that somebody else is going to pray for that person. If I don't raise a dead person, there's no guarantee that somebody else is going to. Like, I believe that I, as a believer, carry the ultimate hope of the universe within me. And in any situation where there's a problem, if I don't step out to provide that ultimate hope, I have no guarantee that anybody else is going to come along and provide that hope for them.
Right.
So I believe, like, you commented actually recently on a blog post of mine that I call personal responsibility for healing. And I talked about how, in prayer lines and like churches and things, people get all bent out of sorts because they're praying and they say, well, you didn't get healed because you didn't have faith. And I'm sorry, I believe that's never an acceptable response. The person who came to you for healing came because they didn't have the faith. They weren't getting healed. They weren't getting the results they need. They're in a position of need, and they're coming to you to help them solve that problem from Christ in you. So if you can't manifest Christ in you in that moment to solve the problem, don't go blaming them. Look at yourself and say, I need to grow to a place where the next time that will not happen.
Right. And I agree with that. And I don't remember the comment I made or whatever that you're referring to, but I totally take that same stance that Jesus only ever rebuked the healers for not having enough faith, but not the people wanting healing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he basically took his disciples to the woodshed and told them, well, and one of my favorite things about that passage, the Matthew 17 version, is it says that they asked him in private why they couldn't, cast that demon out of the boy. And he says, because he didn't have enough faith. Well, who did he say that to? He didn't say that to the dad or his boy. Yeah. He said that to the people who were supposed to heal. But my favorite, one of my favorite, I was listening to a book recently. I don't mean to go off topic, about humor in the Bible, by this Jesuit priest. I forget his name, John Martin or something. And it was like, Between Heaven and Mirth, I think the audiobook was called.
That's awesome.
And he talks about how there's so much humor in the Gospels that doesn't translate from like first century Greek to like 20th century, 21st century like English, that Jesus was hilarious, that Jesus, he would tell parables and the people hearing them would laugh their head off. You know what I mean? Like, and so Jesus, there's all this humor in the Bible, blah, blah, blah. So he's I can't remember if he touched this particular story, but I find it humorous that his disciples ask him in private, why couldn't we cast it out? Well, the obvious answer is because he probably would have answered them in public. You know what I mean? Like, Jesus, why couldn't we have cast him out? Bremner, because you have no faith. Like he would have just answered that and made fools of them. So if they're like, oh, I'm not going to take the blame for this one. Let's wait until we're alone with him. And there's so much of that.
That's called wisdom.
Yeah, you could be smart when you're dumb. And the disciples get a bad rap, but we forget they were probably young. Most of them were probably really young, and whatever.
They were probably half of your and my age.
Yeah, I've heard John the disciple could have been as young as 7 years old when Jesus called him. I don't know, but anyway, we all have these things that we were dumb when we were young, and the disciples get a bad rap sometimes. But to get back to your point, I don't believe in kicking babies for not walking. I don't believe,
right?
That's where they're at. I don't, somebody comes to you or me or whoever looking for healing because they expect us to be able to deliver the goods. And I take responsibility for that. If I pray for someone, I feel like it's the burden is on me, not them. I do believe in, we need to have faith and stuff, but I believe the responsibility is more on the healer or the person that God's using to heal. I know some people trip over me if I say the healer, but God, of course, is the healer. I get
always.
It. Save your emails. But, using us with our bodies. And, it's something to be very careful about and not rebuke a person and tell them they didn't have enough faith and that's why they didn't get it, whatever.
Well, the other thing is I don't have any control over that other person. I have no control over their faith level. I have no control over their beliefs. The things I cannot manage is everything else. What I can manage is me. And so, that's the thing I find most important is I can't manage everybody else. I can't manage where they're at and whatever, but I can take personal responsibility for me and make sure that I am living in a place of faith, that I am living in a place where whatever the need is, that I'm as prepared as I can be to meet it. Does that mean I'm always prepared? No, it means it shows me areas where I need to prepare more. It shows me areas I need to grow, but it means that I take personal responsibility for the things going on in my life and those around me as far as my influence or ability to influence that, and I think it's the mature response. It's kind of getting back on our original topic, it's also the reason I wrote some of these books. Like I wrote Gemstones from Heaven. The next one I wrote was Feathers from Heaven on this topic. I have 3 more planned on the subject, one on gold dust, one on oil, and one on manna. I just have a bunch of other stuff I'm writing about first, actually resurrection and immortality. But I'm writing these books because I believe we need maturity. And I think maturity is the big thing that's lacking when it comes to a lot of this sort of fantastical, if you will, supernatural stuff. People, when somebody gets healed or has a limb grow out or something, it's within the realm of sort of accepted and or expected miracles or expected supernatural whatever. A lot of this other stuff falls into that nebulous gray area of I'm not sure if I believe it because I don't see where it is in Scripture. Well, that doesn't make it not in Scripture, but it just means you don't see where it is in Scripture. And there's no verse that said, "Yea, verily, I shall maketh gemstones fall from heaven unto thee. Verily, verily, saith the Lord." You know, just because it doesn't say it in a single verse you can just point to, doesn't make it not generally scriptural. But right. it does mean that we have to dig a little deeper, and we have to look at wisdom. We have to use some discernment, and those things are the things that I think are most missing in this game. We have to be discerning, and I don't care if somebody discerns the situation differently than I do and decides it's not God. That's fine. It doesn't matter to me if somebody arrives at a different answer. What matters to me is that even if we arrive at different answers, can we still walk in unity as brethren? Can we still say it's okay that we don't agree? We're not going to let this be a dividing thing between us. Can we say that even if we don't agree, maybe what we don't agree with is a situational thing? Maybe in a situation where you're discerning it wasn't God, maybe somebody actually planted that gem and it wasn't coming from heaven. So your discernment was accurate in that situation. It's like those are the things that I think we have to give grace to one another. Recognize that, before I jump on you and be like, Steve, you're insert whatever I think, like maybe I need to talk to you, maybe I need to have a conversation with you. Maybe I need to get to know you a little bit before I decide it's my job as, the divine corrector to speak into your life and correct you on something. Like a relationship is one of the hallmarks, I think, of Christianity. Like that's where we speak from as a place of relationship. In, I think, no other culture on the planet do people tend to instruct other people outside of the context of relationship, except in, like, United States culture.
Or Western culture in general.
Western culture, Western Christianity. Well,
I definitely know some Canadians who fit your description, so it's not just America, but...
Okay, and that may be. But, like, Western Christianity, Western culture as a whole, like... I don't think there's a single person in general in historic Jewish culture who ever would have said, random person I don't know from Adam, it's my job to let you know how things are.
And I think the internet has helped with that.
Oh, for sure. But it's really easy to be an armchair theologian. It's really easy to sit back and just basically judge the world about things that we don't have any experience on. All we've done is search through our Bible, put up a list of verses that we think prove that it's not God and say, therefore, it's not God, instead of encountering the situation, talking to the people, listening to their heart. I mean, I hope if there's one thing that's been made clear in our conversation, it's that I love Jesus. I love people. I really don't like it when the devil hurts people. And I really badly want to do something about that, which is why I try and, heal the sick, which is why I write books to help bring understanding so everybody's not fighting each other. So I mean, like, so that there's some joy and peace brought into these situations, and then when God does something, we can enjoy it. We can enjoy it and not be in fear. Because one of the things the enemy wants to do is put everybody in fear. Well, how do you know that's God? Well, when was the last time the devil chucked a gemstone at you? Okay? Let's be honest. How often do people get tempted to speak in tongues? I really don't know of any demons tempting you to speak in tongues. Well, I tried to lay that down at the altar, brother, but I just couldn't hold it back, and the enemy just forced me to speak in tongues. Right. Okay, I've never heard anyone say that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny about, I experienced this with tongues, so I assume you experience it with something like gemstones, is how many experts there are about speaking in tongues who don't speak in tongues.
Exactly.
Why are they an expert? I don't know, but they are. And maybe somebody listening to this feels that way and is annoyed I'm making fun of them. But it always amazes me how people who don't believe in miracles, don't believe in signs and wonders, don't believe in tongues or gifts of the Spirit, whatever, how many people are such experts about the proper way things are supposed to be who come from the position that they don't even really have any experience with those things anyway. So what's their point? Is maybe just because it's beyond their comfort zone or something, and everything outside of that line, that bubble of comfort zone, is suspect or unbiblical or heresy or whatever. I assume you must have the same type of thing if you get people asking you like annoying questions,
And I do. And that's, again, like I said earlier, the thing that makes it annoying is not the question, it's the attitude. Right. You can ask me any question you want. And if it's something personal I don't feel like answering, I might tell you that. But the fact is, I'm not going to negate the value of your question. I'm just going to say that I feel like I don't feel comfortable answering that. But this kind of stuff, no, I'm glad to answer any question you have. Just don't have an attitude with me about it,
Sure.
Like, have an attitude of somebody who's at least questioning. Even if you're skeptical, that's fine. Have an open enough mind and or heart that you're at least willing to consider what I'm saying and weigh it one way or the other, and then come up with whatever decision you decide on. Ask me some more questions if you want. But have enough of an openness in your own heart to at least fairly consider the idea.
Right.
As opposed to just say, well, that can't be God. And usually what people do is, I actually have somebody yesterday hopped on my Facebook page and on one of these, and you may even have seen the comments, but I actually have blocked a number of people in the last 2 days. I don't know. I don't like to block people, and I don't normally. Like, the only people I block are when I'll usually start out the conversation and try and give it a go. But when it continues to be this vengeful attitude towards me, I'm like, okay, this is not in keeping with the type of environment I like to foster.
Right.
You can go.
Well, and
when
you've got
somebody
sorry. I was just gonna say you got like 5,000 Facebook friends or something.
Yeah, basically.
So you've got more activity and interaction that goes on. I mean, I'm not even there yet. I've just got a few thousand, but I make almost everything public except for kind of like my family photos or things like that.
Yeah, and I do the same thing.
And so I don't know if this is what you do, but what I've been starting to do is when I get a new friend request, I put them on my acquaintance list. So they're not going to see everything necessarily. And I don't follow everybody back. I just, unfollow people. I don't know who they are. But because I do like almost everything I post publicly, I can't like unfriend someone and then they can't see what I'm posting anymore. So it's got to be a more deliberate thing, like blocking. So, that's just, I'm throwing that out there for people on Facebook who only have a few hundred friends or something and don't understand why.
Especially when all they have is a setting to friends of friends.
Yeah.
Like, only people who know you or know people who know you
right.
can see it.
For some of us who make more of our lives public, who are using a platform, podcasting, blogging, and we want to, allow everyone who wants to follow us to be able to, I feel like you have to be more direct and harsh with people who don't know how to interact with respect and feel like attacking other people in your threads or something. Like I have that problem where I just cut if people can't show respect and interact gracefully, I eventually have to block them, because if I unfriend them, they can still do that, because I'm public.
Exactly.
And
it comes down to a matter of having to set boundaries. And somebody who doesn't, like you're saying, somebody who doesn't have that level of interaction on social media, they don't have to set the same boundaries.
Exactly.
Because I leave my boundaries wide open, I have to set them differently. Like
exactly.
somebody, my wife, I'm pretty sure only has friends of friends as her permissions on her stuff. Well, I'm in addition to being a person who wants to minister and touch people and being a blogger and whatever, I also run a business that involves social media. So, it involves me leaving my boundaries wide open in some directions, so everything I do is public.
Right.
But unless, like I said, it's a very infrequent thing, but occasionally I will set very specific permissions on something. But usually it's just public.
Yeah.
So like...
I don't mean to cut you off, but it's been more than 2 hours of talking, and I'm going to have to get off here to get ready to take my daughter.
Oh, yeah, buddy.
But I want to make sure... because, I had you on here talking about your books, that you can, let listeners know how they can get their hands on a copy of your book. What's your website? Throw those things out for the listener.
Sure. So my website is thekings, Kings, of Eden.com. My last name is King. So thekingsofeden.com. And my books you can get on, one, if you go to the website, they're there, but you can also get them anywhere on Amazon. If you search Gemstones from Heaven in the search bar, it's the first book that's going to pop up. There's only 2 books on the topic anyway. So get both of them,
Right.
But there's only 2 books on the topic to begin with. So it's not like you have a lot of ones to choose from. Feathers from Heaven, I think it's like 3rd or 4th down because I just put it out. But hop on my website, thekingsofeden.com. If you have thoughts or questions, email me at thekingsofeden@gmail.com. I like to make the names really confusing.
And we'll link to your books in at least, the version of this I put on my website. I'll give you the code for this to put the play button and all that on your site, should you want it.
Okay.
Most people who have websites that come on this, oftentimes they put their own version on their site. So I'll give you that stuff if you want, but I'll definitely be linking to your books on my end. Definitely going to read them now. I started to a couple of days ago, but just didn't get far into them like I wanted. But that's one of the things I like about doing podcasts like this is sometimes I like reading the person's books before talking to them so I can have well-informed questions to ask them. And then other times I might not have read their book and then I want to after getting to talk to them and get to know them, So this has definitely been interesting for me. I hope you don't mind if I cut this off.
No, not at all. Relatively, man. We already...
Yeah. Because I'm going to edit out stuff like us talking about doing this and or maybe the audiobook stuff at the beginning. But otherwise, I like just recording the conversation as is and fixing it or, removing.
Yeah, for sure.
Really personal stuff.
All of the times where you had to say, Michael, I still can't hear you.
Exactly. So it'll take me like a week or 2 maybe before this is online at the earliest. The longer the interview is, the more time it takes to prepare it. And the more problems we have during it. Right. But no, man, I'm happy with how this turned out. When you approached me, I thought, well, I've been thinking maybe he's the type of person I should interview. So it's a good thing you asked me, or I might have taken longer to get around to it. But I'm glad we had this conversation, especially when
This has been fun.
Yeah, and people complain sometimes that it's 2 hours long, but when you make a podcast and you and the other person get going like this, it goes fast. It's a short 2 hours.
It really is. Yeah.
So you want to do this again someday?
Yeah, I'd love to. Here's one other thing I'll tell you too. I'm always more than happy to. I find this kind of stuff fun to begin with, and it's fun talking to you. And true, I really do. And I know you got to get going. I really like your attitude because, like I said, you have legitimate questions, and you're very open to let's at least look at these ideas and discuss them like adult human beings. So we don't have to come away agreeing, but we can still learn something from each other.
So yeah, thanks for being on Fire on Your Head, Michael. Someday I'd love to keep talking some more with you. Don't know how soon, but I enjoy conversations like this. And have a great rest of the day.
You as well. Thanks again, Steve. I really appreciate it.
All right. So this is bye to you and bye to everybody listening too.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, you can find us in iTunes or on Stitcher Radio or directly at fireonyourhead.com for more options. If you want to support Steve and Lily Brimner as missionaries in Peru or find out more about what they do, be sure to head over to their blog at stevebrimner.com or check out Steve's Kindle books on Amazon and leave reviews of the ones you liked. See you next time.